So Jared, you can get started whenever you would like. We do have quorum.
That is good. All right. It's the 11th. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is January 11th, 5 o'clock of 2024. And so we are rolling. And speaking of rolling, we are going to do roll call. We have Aaron Sargent, myself, Joey, Nick, Jake, Alice, Spencer, and we have Gretchen, Lola, Jennifer, and Mia, who is doing notes as awesomely as usual. All right. Next up is our agenda approval. So I will entertain motions to get that done. I'd, make one and vote on it, but I can't.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for this week's meeting for S&A Committee.
I will second that.
God, that's even on the same camera. That's really convenient. Great. So let's do hands to see if that's approved. I think that's enough. And next on, we're going to the approval of the minutes from last week, which is from the 4th. And these are quite extensive minutes, yeah, but they're good. You guys covered a lot of ground when I was absent. So I will also entertain motions to approve that.
So motioned.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I mean, the alternative is that we could just, sit here and, kind of stare at each other. I'm pretty busy though, so let's not do that. All right, so let's do a show of hands to see if we can get that approved. And so approved. All right, moving on, we have reports. I don't have anything to report because I wasn't here last week. So we're moving on to advisors. Joey, Aaron, you got anything?
The only thing I have is just a brief update for you all, and Aaron and I haven't been able to touch base, so it's also updating Aaron. I shared with you all last week that we had a meeting scheduled coming up on the 18th with all of the base funded units and communications to kind of go over a number of things. We've been requested to see if we can reschedule that meeting due to that it conflicts with one of the Provost Canada open forums. And so we're likely, after I talk with Aaron and confirm, are going to likely look for another time to reschedule that with others, just so you all know. But we'll provide an update to you all once that gets set. And then obviously as anything comes up before or afterwards. But that is the only report I have at this time.
I'm assuming, Joey, that would be pushed ahead, not back.
You mean move it sooner?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, no.
Yeah,
it will be further out. Further out, yes.
I mean, the other option is that we could just say that it happened in 2023.
Just be like, yes, that already happened. Don't you all remember?
Yeah. What's a little gaslighting between friends?
Yeah. Okay. We'll try not to do that. We'll try not.
Yeah. Aaron, do you have anything?
I do not have anything. No.
All right, ASCWU.
Yeah, I have a few things for you guys. One of the first ones is Meet Your Reps. So that'll be in Circ 137 on the 24th, 1 to 3. So it's just going to be a lot of student government folks there. There's going to be food. So if you guys are interested, come down at 137 on the January 24th. And ESC night market is going to be January 26th. So there's going to be a lot of clubs selling food, and that is going to be 6 to 8 p.m. And if you guys are interested, lobby day is February 8th and 9th. So if you guys are interested, just shoot an email to either me or the ACW governmental office, and they can help you guys get started on what we're going on that.
Nick, do
And
you
that is all
mind
I have.
letting them know what Lobby Day consists of for those who might not be familiar?
Yeah. So Lobby Day consists of ASCW bringing students to Olympia, and in Olympia, what we'll be doing is talking to legislators on a few bills, one of them being the Washington College grant, the expansion of that. Basic needs is another one, as well as healthcare. So there's quite a few bills that we'll be talking to legislators about. And what we'll be doing is giving testimonies to legislators of, so for example, why the Washington College grant has been useful to you, and really just telling our personal story to legislators. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, and that is all I have.
All right. We're moving on to communications received, which is Joey's domain.
We have not received any since last week. No.
All right. We're going to hold a short moment here for public comment. If anyone would like to do anything, you can raise your hand or just start talking. Either one works. Doesn't necessarily have to be business related. You can talk about how awesome your dog is. You know, that'll be official record.
Are y'all ready for it to drop down into -6?
It's going to be exciting.
Like weather, this is crazy.
Yeah, Alice is from Texas, so this is extra amusing for me.
Yeah, it will be very cold tomorrow and Saturday, so please
Yes.
be prepared. Make sure to have your heat on. For those who aren't familiar with pipes freezing, do what you got to do to avoid all of those things, but stay warm and safe.
Yep. Definitely second that. All right, Lola.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that the city of Ellensburg put out a notice that Hal Holmes Community Center is going to be a warming center over the weekend because of the extreme temperatures forecasted. And we're reminding people that the student union is also open pretty lengthy hours. So obviously more community down at Hal Holmes, but also off-campus students, just to help remind people if they get in a situation with frozen pipes or their heat goes out or whatever, to just head on to the circ and hang out there.
Yeah, and Hal Holmes is right next to the library in town, for those that don't know. It's a nice big space. Okay, well, I'm thinking that's going to end our public comment unless there are any objections in the next couple of seconds. Nope, we are good. Moving on to new business. Base funding adjustment and reallocation requests for Central News Watch and funding to Observer and Pulse. So, Joey, I think I'm going to throw you under the bus again. You want to give us a description of this?
I mean, I'll give a brief overview and then we'll turn it over to Gretchen with student media and Jennifer to kind of there. So really, as you'll see, and you have the document that was attached that was initially submitted, this is really more of a request of reallocation of existing base funding. And so using those funds a little bit differently than what they were initially allocated for. This one, as you'll see, and we can ask questions and stuff, and I'm happy to answer them, but we can also talk about it during deliberation because I don't want to eat into Gretchen and Jennifer's time as well. This one's a little bit different than what you've all seen before because this is really asking to use funding that was for one program and moving it over to two other programs versus still existing in the one and just use a little bit differently. But if you're okay with it, Jared, I would probably turn it over to Gretchen and Jennifer to kind of give their rundown and spiel on the specifics and the why, and then we can open it to Q&A.
What are you talking about? Money doesn't move in America. It just sits in some giant bank account. Nobody does transfers. All right, I'm turning it over to Gretchen and Jennifer. You have the floor. Go ahead.
Perfect. I don't seem to be able to share my PowerPoint slide. Is there a way we could enable that?
You should be able to now.
Is everyone able to see that okay? Perfect. So kind of what Joey touched upon, we wanted to come before you today to kind of talk about taking funds that have been allocated to Central News Watch and kind of redistributing them to the Observer and Pulse. So Central News Watch is the student media news broadcast organization, which delivers news in a video format to the student body and the Ellensburg community. It is overseen by a business manager. Its budget is overseen by a business manager, which is me. Unfortunately, Central News Watch is not being offered this academic year just because the faculty advisor who did oversee the program retired last year. So we don't have anybody to oversee the students right now. But the budget has been allocated $18.6 thousand for the academic year. What we're proposing is that we take that 18.6 and redistribute it to the Observer newspaper and Pulse magazine. These are very similar to Central News Watch. They're kind of cousins in a way because they kind of share a purpose of delivering news and entertainment to the community. So the purpose of the money is still living on. The why carries over to these two organizations that we're asking you to reallocate these funds to. Not only that, but the Observer and Pulse have the infrastructure to kind of hit the ground running with this funding. Whereas if we had it stay in Central News Watch, a faculty member would need to be hired, students would need to be enrolled, and that would all take time to use those funds, and it will likely not happen this academic year. So those funds would basically sit and be underutilized. And as an initiative, we're kind of trying to direct students that would have gone to Central News Watch into the Observer so they can still kind of study that discipline. Using the funds, as I said, the Observer and Pulse have the means to use these funds immediately. We have paid staff and we have printing costs that we are currently having trouble balancing in our budget just because there has been increased wages. I think the last time the minimum wage did not go up in Washington was 2016. So we've just been having a hard time kind of managing that. We have taken measures to try to combat this, to try to stay within our budget, including, for an example, the Observer has cut their student hours by about a third. So we are taking this very seriously and we are trying to stay within our budget as much as possible. But the fact that our allocations in both budgets have been cut, and I think in the Observer, for example, from 2019 to 2023, we've had a 54% allocation cut, which has been very challenging to kind of stay in the black. But supporting both the Observer and Pulse magazine financially means that you're supporting the students that are working to make these products possible. You're supporting the students that work on the newspaper and the magazine and help them further their education, not only in the classroom, but in a real world way, and they get the benefit of being paid. So splitting the funds between the Observer and Pulse would help cover the deficit, but also help support the students that are currently taking those courses. For the deficits for this academic year, or this financial year, I should say, we are looking at about $56,000 in resources. This is taking into account the revenue that we have generated so far. It's hard to predict revenue for the future, so we've just kind of stuck with the revenue we've already had because it's a guarantee. We're hoping that we'll have more resources, but it's not promised. So we'll end with about $56,000 in resources. That's before the money is swept. But with the wage increase and our printing costs, we're going to end with a total expenses of about 66.8, which means we're going to have about a $10.6 thousand deficit in the Observer this year. For Pulse magazine, kind of similar vein, Pulse does not make as much money from ads or general revenue as much as the Observer does currently. And so the total resources we predict for the end of the year will be about $20,000, again, before the money is swept away or the allocation is swept away. But our expenses are going to be about 43.2 just from printing costs and wages alone. I will point out that Pulse only has 2 people on staff. So we are working with minimal staff right now. We have cut staff to the point where the class can function as a magazine, but the paid opportunities for students is becoming very limited to try to stay within our budget. So we're going to end with about a $22,800 deficit in Pulse. But if we take the money that is currently being underutilized in Central Newswatch and we split it equally between the Observer and Pulse, that deficit becomes much more manageable. You can see that $10,600 becomes about 1.4, and 22.8 becomes 13.5. These are much more manageable deficits. Obviously, it would be ideal if it was in the black, but at least it's not as much in the red, and with revenue generated, we can hope to get to the black. So basically, to summarize, we are requesting that the funds in Central Newswatch currently is being reallocated to the Observer and Pulse magazine. It will make the deficits in those budgets much more manageable, but it will, like, excuse me. The big point is that it's going to help the students learn, give them opportunities and incentive to learn those disciplines. And it gives us the potential to hopefully regain to full staff and support the students better in the future. And I'd like to open it up to any questions you all have.
I have one to start out with. Have you considered moving the location of your services to Black Hall so that you would be in the black?
We have not. That's a good point.
We do teach Observer and Pulse and Black Hall, if that makes a difference.
Oh, well, there you go then. Any actual serious questions from anyone? I'm going to assume that means no questions. Thank you for the presentation. That was good.
I'll ask a question, Jared.
Go ahead.
Just because I think it might come up when you all are deliberating next. Oh, and I have a note on the side, so I apologize. One sec. Thank you. I guess the question I asked for you, Gretchen, just so it come up on there. I know that this is looking at, I mean, let me clarify. The request is really only to reallocate those funds for this year, right? For this fiscal year.
That is correct, and a really good point. Like, it would be really great if Central Newswatch could come back and have its money again in the future. But for this academic year, it's just not, it's not going to be revitalized. So.
Okay. I think that's helpful for them to know, like, this is a one-time for this year, because Central Newswatch, as you had alluded to, is not able to run this year and to provide that. And I don't know if there's an answer to this, so I apologize putting you on the spot for this one. I think if that's the case, that Central Newswatch is able to run next year and have its funding, and you kind of touched on this, I think, but are there plans or things in place you all are looking at for Observer and Pulse, knowing kind of where they're at right now if they're not able to have that additional funding?
So you mean operating under the assumption that Central Newswatch won't operate next year?
I was thinking operating under the assumption Central Newswatch is back next year, meaning you wouldn't have the option to potentially reallocate. What would be the plan for Observer and Pulse? Or is that still being looked at?
So it is something to look at. I think the biggest thing right now is that we are trying as much as we can to get to the black, right? We're doing everything we can. We are trying to get advertisements, which is how we get that additional revenue. And in some places we're making strides. Pulse has gotten a couple of ads this last quarter that has helped boost their budget a little bit. The Observer tends to get more ads, just they run more often. I think that, you know, they're kind of known by outside organizations a little bit more, and we're working to get Pulse that same kind of reputation. Not to say Pulse doesn't have a reputation. Everyone loves the magazine. Obviously, it's very popular. It flies off the shelves. But I think the fact that the Observer prints more frequently. But yeah, this is really just a one-time thing. We're trying everything in our power to get back to the black and try to get to a baseline that is feasible. Like I said, we're trying really hard to not overspend on wages. We're looking at cutting those wages down as much as we can. The printing costs, we've looked at different avenues, and we are printing like the minimum. Like, if we print less issues, it doesn't make a difference in the cost. So that's we're doing as much as we can there, and we're trying really hard to get revenue for the paper and the magazine. It's just not as lucrative as it was before the pandemic.
All right. Well, thank you for that answer. And thank you, Joey, for the question, because if I just had the dad joke, it'd be a little awkward. So, Alice, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, reallocating by y'all sounds like something that I think is great for approving. It seems like y'all have things under wraps and know what's what with your organization. Um, One thing I have been warned of, though, is that we probably won't ever enter before pandemic times. So we should probably operate like that's not gonna ever happen. At least in my,
That's great. That is a great point. I mean, the world has just changed dramatically since COVID.
Right.
We probably understand that if we are going to see the numbers that we saw the pandemic, it's not going to be for a long while. So what we're doing is our best to operate within the new reality.
thank you.
And Joey, remind me, we're going to have probably another meeting next week where we actually vote on this.
Yep, you all will deliberate amongst yourselves and then vote on it next week. Yep.
Okay. All right. Unless anyone has any further questions or comments, I'm going to move on to the next thing.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thanks
you
for
for
having
coming.
us.
Thank you.
All right, so we're moving to the review process for the annual financial reports and program reviews. Me, it's not required that you have that in the middle there, but you can include it if you want to.
Can you spell that for the record, please?
Well, that's onomatopoeia, so it's really up to the listener.
Is that colloquially defined?
Maybe, but I think that would also be dialect based too, because that would be different in another language. So if we were going to translate into, say, Chinese or, German, it would end up looking a lot different. So first up on our list, we have Lion Rock visiting writer series. I assume somebody's going to describe what that is. Probably Joey.
I mean, so I give a little brief one on there. And Jared, I know you weren't able to be here last week. And so if you haven't had a chance, I'll give a brief, again, since this is our second week doing it. Hopefully you all had a chance to look over the materials in advance. I'll explain kind of what each one is as a brief summary, but won't necessarily walk through the whole documents. I can pull them up and I will share my screen real quick. So that way you all can see them for the sake of the recording. One sec here. But Lions Rock is actually one of our newer base, and so you're going to get a little preview. I do. Lions Rock is actually one of our newest base funding units. It's one of the only new ones that we provided funding for the last funding cycle that was not previously. And so, and again, we have both looking at last year as well as the program review itself for this year. But really what it is it's a program that provides a number of different opportunities that bring in guest writers to come in on campus. It's open to all students. The community actually is also involved and open. They don't limit within that, but brings a number of authors and writers in to provide kind of talks, give some pieces for students to have the ability to ask questions and interact with them. Both about the ability to be an author and writer, but also sometimes and often frequently about what it is they're writing about within that specific area. So again, you all have the annual financial report, which is what you'll see on the screen right now, which is looking at, again, the funding from last year. So this was the actuals. And then we also have the program review, which is asking them the questions about this year and their assessment. So I would open it up, Jared, if there's any questions that anyone has about Lions Rock specifically, if there's any things you all want to highlight or point out as concerns, things we want to ask them, pretty much on that side. This is our review of the program and how they're using the funding.
And it looks like Mia was kind enough to drop the actual documents into chat in case anyone needs them.
Yes, thank you, Mia.
All right. I don't have any. I remember we actually had some discussions on this at the end of last year, if I remember right.
Yep.
So I don't have any questions on this myself. Does anyone else have any questions? I've seen slight head shakes and
No, I'm looking at the base funding overview and their annual report, and this all looks very clean cut to me. This makes sense.
all right. Okay, and because we discussed this previously, I assume that we're now doing deliberation and voting for this.
No, so we're actually not, there's nothing to vote on these, Jared. It's really just, we're looking at them, providing feedback. If there's a request for something, like we want to call them in to present or answer questions. Otherwise, it's really you all as a committee reviewing essentially the assessment information they provided and looking at, are there concerns? If not, then it's like, great, there's no concern, there's no feedback to be given, no questions we have, move on to the next one at that point. But this is, again, where your all's role is to look at what they provide, see if it doesn't meet what the intent is, or if it's not in alignment with S&A funding, or now that we have the updated strategic plan and mission, it's not in alignment. Give them feedback, since next year is the last year of the funding cycle, and they'll also be requesting funding, I would assume, requesting funding again. So giving them feedback on what we would like to see or things along those lines. Yeah. Otherwise, there's nothing to vote on. We just move on to the next item.
Okay. Well, I'm personally happy. Does anyone have anything that they would like to bring up?
Yeah, I just thought of something.
Go for it.
We got question, I'm looking at the service and activity fee annual report for Lion Rock Visiting Writers Series. I'm on question number 3 on the first page. Please provide a detailed explanation of any fund transfers. I'm just curious, like, I understand that they're talking about how our fund balance sweep is gonna impact their funds. I'm just curious how. Like, I just wish I knew a little bit more about, like, yes, it's gonna occur, but how does that impact this organization? And is this gonna be a problem for them?
Yeah. And so this one, Alice, because you're talking about the annual financial report, right? Question 3, where it talks and they answered transfer due to S&A fund balance sweep. Is that the
Yeah.
right spot right here? Yeah. And so you can see, so this is looking at what actually happened last year. And so Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong in reading this, but essentially they spent last year's allocation as well as the fund balance they transferred from the first year. So they only had $736 that were swept back. Is that right, Aaron?
Oh.
Yeah, Aaron's nodding for those on the recording.
Yes, that's correct. And the if at the very bottom, oh,
It was just.
sorry, the very bottom number where it shows the $0 ending balance, that's just sort of, that represents that everything was either spent or swept back. And typically, because we don't normally transfer S&A funding from one program to another, there would generally not be any transfers, which is why I think that question exists, is because why would you be moving money unless it had been approved by the S&A committee? And now that we're doing that funding sweep, the accounting entry is a transfer. And so pretty much, I think all of the transfers that will show up are going to be related to that. And I think that as we go through these and you all are considering what what the data sort of means, I would say that, the transfer represents the money that was left over, of course, from their budget. And, that can be interpreted in that maybe they didn't have, weren't fully staffed, or maybe, who knows what, but that's kind of how I would think about that. Does that help kind of guide your thoughts through here?
I mean, it's as nebulous as what I thought, but I mean, it confirmed what my understanding. I don't think I'd have a good answer without asking them directly.
I think the other part, Alice, that may, and this is the intent. So going to what Aaron said before I do that, this is part of why probably next year, assuming we move forward with the policy changes we've talked about permanently, we'll slightly edit these annual financial, quite specifically these last two, to be a little bit more specific on ideally pretty much everyone's going to have a fund transfer now because the funds are swept. So it'll probably asking, are there other fund transferred beyond rollback? Also, if you had any money that rolled back or overspent, explain kind of why.
I'm not personally interested in the fund transfer so much as the why.
Yeah.
Like that
Well, and
why.
I think that where if we look at the program review document, that's them asking about this year. So that's a pretty, like $700 is pretty minimal, nothing. I wouldn't question that too much. I know there's a pretty small budget, but leaving that amount is really just hard to spend down to the exact dollar that you have on there without going over. And so I appreciate they didn't go over. Looking at the program review, though, is asking them kind of what is the impact, question 9 specifically, given the budget reductions, continuing for what specific impacts have there been on your program? And so you can see in there their answer on how they've adjusted and navigated that. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not that much money, but it is like, I mean, that's about half a student employee's budget right there. So if we just saw an increase in minimum wage and a little bit of a rollovers under amount, I could see them cutting a student employee or something, and I'd be curious to see that information.
I think another sort of if as we kind of think towards the future would be maybe instead of the question like kind of what Joey was saying would be what prevented you from spending your full allocation that could have been spent on things such as students or goods and services, and then it kind of furthers the question of, does that mean you don't need as much money in the future for maybe other things that I think, is that kind of,
Yeah, or just allocation. Maybe they don't, not that they don't need as much money, but that, maybe we're just not all informed about where it's going.
Sounds like that's about 2 large pizza parties or a huge amount of staples. Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps that one up unless we have any further questions or comments on that. It's like a no on that, so let's move on to Manistash.
And again, I'll kind of try and do this for each of them since Jared asked on the first one. I want to be equitable. So I'll give a brief summary of what it is. Menashdash is one we've had for a number of years. For those who aren't familiar, when you just see Menashdash, since if you are here locally in Kittitas County, that is an area, it's a geographic piece. This is referring to the publication Menashdash, which is a journal that's published in conjunction with some of our faculty in areas within the English department. But it's a literary journal that students have the ability to provide, whether that be poems or articles or things to be published in there. So it's a publication of student work that's within there. And so the S&A funding provides the funding to publish the Menashdash journal itself.
Great. Has everyone reviewed these? And I'm assuming we've talked about this last week when I wasn't here.
No, we didn't. So each one of these is going to be new every week when they're sent out. And so these were all sent out this week. This is the only time we're looking and reviewing them, unless we call and ask Menashdash to come and chat with us. So,
okay. Does anybody have any questions about this so far? Or that they would like to posit to Xander? Go ahead.
I'm sorry for being late. But I'm curious, it looks like the fiscal year document, at least the one I have, doesn't have the breakdown of the numbers at the bottom. Maybe I'm missing it. But I'm not seeing the numerical breakdown that some of the other ones have had.
Lions Rock or Monash Dash? Monash Dash is the only one that doesn't have the breakdown.
Okay, well, that makes more sense then. For Menastas, that's what I meant.
Aaron can get that to us at a future one. Thank you, Xander. You're right. It does not have their budget part here. Let me stop sharing my screen and I can pull it up for you all to see real quick. One sec.
Thanks,
Okay,
Greg.
sorry.
Sorry about that.
It's okay, Aaron. You're forgiven just this once.
You all can keep. Well, hold on. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, no, Aaron's gonna go check all the other.
I'm gonna have to go check all of them to make sure I won.
Well, that just depends upon what we define as once.
The
Oh,
art
thank
gallery and museum both have them, as if you were curious about those two.
Okay,
You
so
all
Joy,
can still discuss or ask questions while I'm doing this in the background.
okay. Are there any other comments or questions or things we would like to posit to Monastash?
I was told to ask questions, so how's your week going?
Busy, very busy.
Me too.
Well, maybe I don't have the budget one in my email that I can easily find. So we will pull it up and share it with you all next time. Let me get back to where I was so I can share my screen. But we still have the questions they asked on there that you can look at, as well as their program review.
Hey, I've got it here.
Oh, do you? Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I believe I can share this.
Those do appear to be numbers.
Are you able to see that?
Yep.
Okay. There you go.
And it looks like we stole all their money.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I would describe it as that. But that's kind of where the rest of the narrative behind with all of the attachments goes as to why they're not spending as much as they thought.
Yeah.
It's actually 2 years worth, because remember at the end of the first year, well, I don't remember, I wasn't here, but we didn't we let them carry forward those funds, and so it is sort of most of 2 years.
Would you prefer a temporary unloan? Okay, well, being serious now, I don't see any issues with this. The numbers, they make sense to me. I don't have any questions on this. Does anyone else have any questions on the financial side of this? Alice is shaking her head no.
At least from what I see, everything looks like it's in order.
Okay,
I think oh, go ahead, Aaron.
I was gonna say I'm gonna stop sharing whenever you let me know.
I think the only thing I'd say before you stop sharing, and I think everything looks in order. I think it's definitely something, as we look at this and we'll see what they request come next base funding cycle. But as you can see, they're really, given changes and things that have shifted in the program, really not utilizing all the funding that they had requested previously. And so I think that'll be definitely highlighted. Now, they may choose not to request moving forward, given the changes or not. But if they were to come in and request the same exact amount, I think the committee next year should very much ask why it wasn't used. I think they talked about it, but for right now, but yeah. You can go ahead and stop sharing here, and then I'll share mine again.
And going back to what Alice said, the why is the kind of important bit.
Yep.
Okay, so unless we've got anything else we want to do for Monastash, let us go on to the Museum of Culture and Environment.
Oh, right. I was given updates on, sorry. So the Museum of Culture Environment, for those of you who aren't familiar, it is a physical museum that's located here on the Ellensburg campus over in Dean Hall, on the first floor. With part of the funding we provide here is really to help with the staffing and pieces. It has rotating exhibits that kind of come in just like any other museum that you would see elsewhere. It is open, free of charge to students and the public to kind of come in. They have very different kind of focus for each exhibit. So there's quite an assortment of them that come in, and they're always fascinating, great to take a look at. For those of you, if you haven't been to check them out, definitely do. I do appreciate, and so I am gonna highlight some of the ones they've done before that they did last year. They touched on, so you can see, for example, they had 6 exhibits kind of rotate through there last year. One was a Apoyo Mean Support, Tooth and Tusk, Evolutionary Storytelling. I mean, they're all on there, so I won't read them all, but there's quite an assortment of different things that fall within culture and environment. So that is what Museum of Culture and Environment is.
Great. Do we have their financials? Fantastic. I saw a big negative at the bottom. I mean, relatively speaking, of course.
Yeah, there's a big negative at the bottom, but they got this spiel here on their last question explaining it, and I've just kind of been mulling this over. I'll let you read it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. I mean, it sounds like it didn't, like it's an opportunity that didn't come at the best time, but they took it, and it sounds like a good opportunity for the museum. So, I mean, they can pay out in the future. Yeah.
And I think I would highlight on here, one of the things that this looks like as they highlight in that question, which I appreciate them answering it with the detail. This was a planned negative. They intentionally planned to overspend with that. Just to kind of highlight for the sake of the recording, but also for members who may not remember from training. Really what that means is they carry forward that negative balance this year. And so as you can see on here, they ended the year with about 3,000 overspent. When you look at their allocation, and this was again with the 10% reduction last year, what that would really mean is they'd have about only 10,000, maybe 11,000 to spend for this year. And so they have the ability to do that. It doesn't look like this was an accident. They intentionally did it because of what they had mentioned up there on that. So I would hope and anticipate that they should be sticking within their budget for this year, just with the forward planning again.
Yeah, I don't have any questions on this either. Does anyone else?
Yeah, just a quick question. For, I guess, would they have had to come to S&A if they wanted to spend this money, or would that have been within reason to have spent that amount?
To essentially overspend, is that what you're talking about, Nick?
Yes.
No, I mean it's within reason. I would say it's not required. It's often kind of a courtesy or appreciated, but not everyone knows that of coming and be like, hey, just so you all know, really the only reason of coming is if they're going to go substantially over, so there's not a question. They know it's going to come up on the annual report. Usually it's only if they're asking for additional funding. So if they came in and said, hey, we know we're going to spend 3,000 over our budget, can you all provide supplemental because we intend to spend our full allotment the last 2 years? The fact that they didn't really is saying they aren't intending, they were shifting their budget to plan for it. So it wouldn't be uncommon. Yeah.
And I
I'm going
assume
to
that
quickly.
if they go way over, then that actually threatens their financing for the next year, which is why that would be a big no-no.
I would say it likely could. That would be up to you all, Jerry, because essentially what that is, if you go way over, like again, there's only a $14,000 budget. Well, if they overspend by $10,000, that only leaves them 4,000 for the year to operate. And then if they spend their 14,000 still anyways, that means they go into the next year dramatically. And they're like, that's something that you all as the committee, when we're doing these reviews, should be calling out or being like, hey, this looks concerning. Maybe we need to take some action or do something. But yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on the Museum of Culture and Environment?
And I'm just quickly scrolling through their program review if anyone had questions on this as well.
Okay, let's move on to the Sarah Spurgeon Art Gallery. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that horribly.
You're close. And so this is a brief summary. I mean, this is going to be similar in effect to our museum. So the art gallery is located in our art building. So Randall Hall here on campus. Again, it's open and free for any students or community members to come in. They also have rotating exhibits that come in. Obviously, this is solely focused on art, but you'll see different art mediums that are in there. And so go through. And so they give again on their rundown of what they had last year in terms of it, but I'm going to quickly scroll down specifically to the financials in case there's any question on this.
On this one, I did want to point out that their ending balance, there was a transfer from last year that was supposed to happen in the software and did not, and so and that's going to be corrected this year. So the $9,328 deficit is overstated as effectively by 7,500. And they did mention that, but I just kind of wanted to say it.
I appreciate that, Aaron, just to highlight for anyone quickly looking at it. They did answer it here, but yeah. And similarly, I'm going to pull up their program review in case there were questions on here. But any questions on what the art gallery shared with their financials for last year or their review for this year? Or concerns, feedback?
I don't have any. Does anyone else? Okay, Nick and Xander, no. Jake? Okay, and Alice has stepped away, so I think we're good there. Do we have any old business that we need to attend to?
Nope, not that I'm aware of, Jared.
Man, that is the easiest line item on here. Other than maybe the public comment, which we're now moving to. All right, second call for public comment. So if anyone wants to say anything about anything,
I got
Xander.
something. Yeah, sorry for being late again. There are 2 links which are very interesting. And so I was on the wrong one for like 15 minutes. Like, man, am I crazy? Is there a meeting today? So yeah, sorry. I'm glad
you
you're
are
here,
totally
Jared.
good, Xander. Just so people are aware, there is, and this is something me and I have been trying to get the website crew with University Relations to update. When they move to the new website, the main loading page of every office or department can't be updated by the department. It has to go through the website crew. As you can all see, the main page for the website had what was way back in the summer, our meeting that was upcoming, and then the link at that point. Well, we can't change that. So we've kind of embedded it where the agenda is and sent out to you all, but it is something we're aware of. So
I have
apologize.
requested to have that fixed. It looks like they were in the process of fixing that. I haven't checked and confirmed, but semi-related, they recently gave me access to edit the homepage of the student engagement and success page. So possibly if we bug them often enough, maybe they'll give us access to this one too. But I'm working on that. Thank you for bringing that up. If this is still an issue next week and I failed to fix it by then, please bring this up again. I'm trying to work on that, but it's in their queue.
Go Mia.
The other update, and this is not really S&A related, but we're in public comment, so I'm gonna say, just to let you all know, keep an eye on, if you haven't already set up on your email and your phone, the university's emergency notification stuff. Make sure you have it set up, especially with inclement weather and things that we're facing right now. You want to make sure you're up to date, because if there are any delays or cancellations due to the weather, that's where you'll get notified. I know most of you on here are all Ellensburg based geographically. However, for any of our students who operate at any of the centers, you'd also want to make sure you're signed up for each of those. I know specifically like today, Edmonds closed down actually all courses and things after 4 o'clock. And they're going to have an update by 5 a.m. tomorrow on whether or not there'll be anything tomorrow. I know our other institutions are the same. So keep an eye on those things, be safe, stay warm. But that's my only public comment.
Great. Any other public comments? Great, and my cat does not want to make a public comment, so we are good. Okay, I'm going to move to adjourn the meeting at 5:54 on the 11th of 2024.
Thank you all. Have a great evening and a great rest of your week, and a good long weekend. Remember, Monday is MLK Day, so make sure to observe that appropriately, and we will see you all next Thursday.
Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.